Dusty, just 6 practices left for the Cowboys as they get set to head into week 4. And a special honor for one of Coach Mike Gundy's staff members, John.
Yeah, Dean, offensive coordinator Casey Dunn was out of town Saturday. That's because he was inducted into the Idaho Athletic Hall of Fame. He was a 3-time All-American at the University of Idaho, and now before he left for that ceremony, he did script out the offensive portion of Saturday's practice. You know, one of the things that's obvious this spring, and linebacker Xavier Benson touched on it last week, there seems to be a fresh outlook, maybe better chemistry being formed, and there's continued excitement on the defensive side with Brian Nardo, the new DC. We've talked about Kendall Daniels in the new scheme, Colin Clay up front in a slightly different spot. Here's Dusty with some thoughts.
Another week in Stillwater, and all I keep hearing is that the energy, the excitement, it is high for the Cowboys so far this spring, especially on the defensive side, where there's been a lot of learning and a lot of newness. Brian Nardo comes in, and it's going to be a different scheme with that 3-3-5 that we see so in vogue in the Big 12 and throughout college football. Never run a defense like this since Mike Gundy's been the head coach, but he likes what he's seeing so far. And one of the things you'll see different is a 3-safety look. And when they go to that, it's going to be incumbent upon Kendall Daniels, who needs to really be the leader and the dominant playmaker on the back end of this defense. He's been that so far this spring, up and around the line of scrimmage. We've seen in the past, and the range he offers in this rover position, he could be great. How about Colin Oliver? I think he's the best player on this Cowboys defense in the front 7, and they're taking him from defensive end to more of an outside linebacker and second-level linebacker. That's a lot of learning, that's a lot of thinking, and you got to have that versatility, which he has, and he's looked great so far this spring. Those two guys lock in, this defense could be much improved. Justin Wright's looked great from Tulsa. Defensive tackle Justin Kirkland at 6'4", 340 plus has been an immovable force on the interior. Some key pieces stepping up, and a couple of wide receiver transfers. Arlen Bruce from Iowa has been great with his toughness and his speed, making plays, and then also Dejon Stripling out of Washington State, great size on the outside. So the defense starting to round into shape, and the offense with questions at wide receiver heading to spring, we're starting to really find some answers for the Cowboys.
Well, CBSSports.com compiled a pretty interesting list of recruiting budgets for Power 5 schools, the public ones whose records are available. And Georgia topped the list in 2022, spending $4.5 million. Clemson just over $3 million. As for the Big 12, OU and Texas, the top 2, the Sooners spending $2.6, Texas $2.4. Everyone else under $1 million. West Virginia, Texas Tech, OSU at $455,000. Baylor and TCU private, so no numbers. Here's Dusty with his take.
Well, we've known this. You got to pay big to play at the top end of college football in 2023. Look, when Brent Venables took this job, he said he needed the resources to do whatever it took to get the players and the things he needs in Norman to compete at the highest level. And obviously we know recruiting is the lifeblood of college football. So not surprising at all that they've really stepped it up and they have increased how much money they're putting toward the overall recruiting. Number 1 in the Big 12, number 5 in college football, number 4 would be in the SEC, moving there a season from now. And it makes sense. Oklahoma getting what they paid for, a top 5 recruiting class, as they spent top 5 money this past year. And for Oklahoma State, it's what we've said forever. Nobody, and I mean nobody in college football, gets more out of their players and what they have at their disposal than Mike Gundy and the Oklahoma State Cowboys. I got to be honest. I think it's embarrassing that Mike Gundy has built a top 25 program and he has this to utilize and go out and sell the program. Dead last in the Power 5 this year and money spent for recruiting purposes. Bottom 5 the last 6 years when you take the last 6-year average of all the 52 Power 5 schools that were looked at. That's not good enough. Look, they've got to find a way to reallocate some of these resources, give Coach Gundy, give this staff what they need to be able to really step it up and compete at a higher level, both on the recruiting trail and on the field. Look, Oklahoma State, they don't have the highest budget, but they find great players. They do as good a job as anybody at developing those players. And once again, we're reminded just how good Mike Gundy and his staff are in Stillwater.
Let's dive into some of these other resources. I'm with Dusty that it is great for the coach to have successfully pushed for lots of upgrades and the highly ranked recruiting budget and gotten it. However, more to the story. That budget is delivering good stuff and allows coaches things like flying expensive jets to recruit like madmen, but it doesn't help buy or outbid Texas A&M for a defensive lineman or beat Texas for those highly paid offensive linemen. Many well-intentioned loyalists refuse to acknowledge that OU's NIL money doesn't compare to the teams that it really competes against, the Texas schools, Georgia, LSU, Bama, USC, Ohio State, etc. Hey, I don't make this stuff up. With Venables' insanely great recruiting ability and record, can you imagine who he'd sign if he had a level playing surface of NIL money? Who said this, by the way? Guys aren't going to schools where they can create the most value for their future. Guys go to schools where they can make the most money. Me and a guy named Nick Saban. So win the recruiting budgets and be competitive with the NIL funds. Now you're talking natties.